So, where are we? You've made it through 2/3 or maybe even 3/4 of the day. Good. And I've been addressing the beginning of the Eightfold Path. So the first two steps of the Noble Eightfold Path, step one is skillful understanding or right view of the Buddha's message, and that requires that we understand skillful behavior in terms of cause and effect, and wholesome and unwholesome, and we've probably seen that throughout the day, what happens with cause and effect as various thoughts arise and how they influence us, and when they might be unwholesome and when they might be wholesome seeming, and the Four Noble Truths and how they fit into the overall scheme of the Buddhist teachings. And then step two is skillful thinking, or right intention. And it introduces us to these three positive thoughts of generosity, or letting go, and loving friendliness and compassion. Right thought denotes the thoughts of selfless renunciation or detachment, thoughts of love and thoughts of non-harming and compassion, which are extended to all beings. It's very interesting and important, I think, to note that the thoughts of selfless detachment, love, and nonviolence are grouped on this side of wisdom in the path, in the Noble Eightfold Path. And so this can show us that true wisdom is endowed with these noble qualities, and that all thoughts of selfish desire, ill will, harming in the mind that occurs, hatred, when it gets really heavy duty, and violence, are a result of lack of wisdom in all spheres of life, whether individual or social or political. And in the context of meditation practice, should I put this on? Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. So in the context of meditation practice, this means gently placing awareness on our bodies and minds in a not too tight and not too loose manner. Without this view of fundamental loving kindness, really, there's no mindfulness meditation. And practicing mindfulness merely as a mental gymnastic, that leaves us feeling depleted. So as we let go of negative states of mind, we create the space in our mind for cultivating positive thoughts. Skillful thinking means that we replace angry or hostile thoughts with thoughts of loving friendliness. Metta is a natural capacity. That's the word in the four Brahma Viharas. Metta is the word that means loving friendliness, loving kindness, goodwill. And it's a natural capacity, and it's a sense of interconnectedness with all beings. Though we all have seeds of loving friendliness inside of us, we need to make the effort to cultivate it. The loving friendliness that we wish to cultivate is not the love that we ordinarily understand it. It's not an emotion that's conditioned by behavior. True loving kindness does not have an ulterior motive. It motivates you to behave kindly to all beings and to speak gently in their presence and in their absence. And when fully matured, your net of loving friendliness embraces everything in the universe without exception. I know that's a big bill to fill, but it is possible. There was once a meditator that regularly meditates every morning, and they were talking to me in a check-in situation about their practice, and saying, she said, "I must be confused about the Buddha's teaching on right intention. I'm very good about setting intentions and then reminding myself of them. But things don't ever seem to turn out according to those intentions, and I fall into disappointment." So at first, a smile was my response. What a good question. And when asked to explain the intentions, she proceeded to describe a number of goals for her future: to become less tense at work, to spend more time with her family, to stabilize her finances, and more. It sounds a little like New Year's resolutions, doesn't it? She was suffering from a kind of confusion that seems to afflict many bright, hardworking people, mixing up two different life functions that are easily mistaken for each other. All of her goals were laudable, but none would fit within the Buddha's teachings on right intention. Looking at right thought or right intention, at least according to Buddhist teachings, is quite different than what we might first think of as goal making. It's not oriented toward a future outcome. Instead, it's a path or practice that is focused on how we are being in the present moment. Our attention is on the ever-present now in the constantly changing flow of life. We set our intentions based on understanding what matters most to us and making a commitment to align our worldly actions with our inner values. And as we gain insight through meditation and wise reflection and harmonious living, our ability to act from our intentions can blossom. It's called a practice because it's an ever-renewing process. We don't just set our intentions and then forget about them. We live them every day. And although sometimes we might think we're focusing on our inner experience of the present moment, we may actually be focusing on future outcome, even though we have these healthy goals that point in a wholesome direction. We're not being our values. And so when our efforts don't go very well, we get lost in disappointment and in confusion. And when this happens, we may not have a ground of intention to help us regain our mental footing. No way to establish ourselves in a context that's larger and more meaningful than our goal-oriented activity. Goals help us make our place in the world, and they help us be effective. But being grounded in skillful thoughts is what provides integrity and unity in our lives. Through the skillful cultivation of intention, we learn to make wise goals and then to work toward them, achieving them without getting caught in attachment to the outcome. Only by remembering our intentions can we reconnect with ourselves during those emotional storms that cause us to lose touch with ourselves. And this remembering is a blessing because it provides a sense of meaning in our life that is independent of whether we achieve certain goals or not. Can you think of the last time that you were caught up in an emotional storm? Can you remember what kind of thinking got you out of it? Ironically, by being in touch with and acting from our true intentions, we become more effective in reaching our goals than when we act from wants and insecurities. The last time I can think of was a reaction that I had around the kitchen and my stormy thinking when I realized that there were so many things that my partner was unaware of. You know, I left a bowl and a spoon out for him on the counter, and there was bread there too, and he fixed his own bowl, and he looked for other bread. And, you know, this seems like a nutty example, but it did cause a little mini hurricane in this mind, judgment, and, you know, why can't he see what's right in front of him? You know, various things like that. We can always use our partners for examples of stormy things happening if we have one. But, you know, once I remember that my true intention is to cause no harm, that basis of doing no harm, letting go of ill will and greed and hatred and delusion. So once I realized that my intention is to cause no harm, then I was able to reframe what was happening in my mind and bring some relief from the demands and the desires that I was making. All of this, of course, being this stormy thing happening in my mind that I managed to not burst out about. And once we understand this, that we can work with goals and intentions as separate functions, goals and intentions, separate functions, we can train ourselves to continually come back to our intention. In this case, it was doing no harm to myself or another being. And, we can come back to our intentions in the course of a day, and it really helps our goals, the larger outside picture of goals. And so there's some groundwork that has to be done. What would it be like if you didn't measure the success of your life just by what you get and don't get, but gave equal or greater priority to how aligned you are with your deeper values? Goals are rooted in illusion. The word is Maya, rooted in illusion, the external goals. And the illusory world where what we want seems to be fixed and unchanging. But in truth, it's forever changing. And in this world, that Mara, that illusion, the inner voice of temptation and discouragement, it can really flourish. So goals never really fill us in an ongoing way. They provide excitement, the ups and downs of life, but intention is what provides us with self-respect and peace of mind. Cultivating right intention doesn't mean that we abandon goals. We continue to use them, but they exist within a larger context of meaning that offers the possibility of peace beyond the fluctuations caused by pain and pleasure and gain and loss. The Buddha's fourth noble truth teaches right intention as the second step in the Eightfold Path. Cause no harm and treat yourself and others with loving kindness and compassion while seeking true happiness, that which comes from being free from grasping and clinging. Such a statement might sound naive or idealistic, a way that nuns and monks should live, but not suitable for those of us that have to make our own way in this tough, competitive world. But to think this is really to make a big error. In choosing to live with right intention, we're not giving up our desire for achievement for a better life or binding ourselves to being morally perfect, but we are committing to living each moment with the intention of not causing harm with our actions and our words, and not violating others through our livelihood or sexuality. We are connecting to our own desire and sense of kindness and innate dignity. Standing on this ground of intention, we are then able to participate as we choose in life's contests until we outgrow them. We can see over time we outgrow these. Naturally, sometimes things go well for us and other times not. But we don't have to live and die by these endless fluctuations. Our happiness comes from the strength of our internal experience of intention. Our happiness comes from the strength of our internal experience of intention. We become one of those fortunate human beings who knows who they are and are independent of our culture's obsessive winning pressure. We still feel sadness and loss and lust and fear, but we have a means for directly relating to all of these difficult emotions. So that way, we're not really a victim, nor is our happiness and peace of mind dependent on how things are right now. When offering teachings on right intentions, sometimes students ask two things. Isn't this like signing up for the 10 Commandments in another form? Or what about the old saying, the road to hell is paved with good intention? Well, first, the 10 Commandments are an excellent moral guideline for all of us. But right intention is not moral law. It's an attitude, a state of mind that you develop gradually. And so the longer you work with right intention, the subtler and more interesting it becomes as a practice. In Buddhist psychology, intention manifests itself as volition, which is the mental factor that most determines our consciousness in each moment. Volition, our consciousness in each moment. And literally, it's our intention that affects how we interpret what comes into our mind. Take, for example, someone who's being rude and domineering, maybe at a meeting, at work, or someplace else in your life. They are unpleasant, or at least your experience of them is unpleasant. What do you notice? Do you see their insecurity and how desperately hungry they are for control and for attention? Or do you notice only your own needs and dislike and take their behavior personally, even though it really has little to do with you? If you're grounded in your intention, in causing no harm, then your response will be to notice their discomfort and your own suffering, and feel compassion toward both of you. This doesn't mean that you don't feel irritation or that you allow them to push you around, but you avoid getting lost in judgment or personal reaction. And then, can you feel the extra emotional space and orientation to this provides? There's a greater range of options for interpreting difficulties in your life. This emotional space arises. So these are sort of goals disguised as intentions, and then we abandon our inner attentions sometime in pursuit of them. And on top of that, those goals offer only our view of how things are supposed to be, and we become all caught up in the reactive mind. One issue around cultivating intention that trips up a lot of meditators is mixed motives. During practice interviews, sometimes people will confess their anguish at discovering during meditation how mixed motives, their mixed motives were in past situations involving a friend or a family member. They feel as though they're not a good person or they aren't trustworthy. Sometimes my response is to paraphrase that old refrain, if it wasn't for bad luck, I wouldn't have no luck at all. I don't know if any of you have heard this before. If it weren't for bad luck, I would have no luck at all. It's the same with motives. In most situations, if we don't go with our mixed motives, we wouldn't have any motivation at all. We would just be stuck. The Buddha knew all about mixed emotions and mixed motives. In the Majjhima Nikaya Sutta, this is a really interesting sutta. I actually made a copy of it if anybody wanted to read it. It's called the Dog Duty Ascetic. And I won't go into all the details about it, but you can imagine in the Buddha's time, 2,600 years ago, and there were people doing different practices, And in the dog duty ascetic, one devotee, dog,
D-O-G.
yeah, dog duty.
Duty.
The person acted like a dog. And another person had ox. They acted like an ox. When you read the sutta, the person comes in, he gives his acknowledgments to the Buddha, and then he lays down and curls up beside him, just like a dog. And so these two people come in. And amazingly enough, the Buddha uses this sutta to point out 4 kinds of karma. And in it, he describes how dark intentions lead to dark results, and bright intentions lead to bright results. And then he says bright and dark intentions, there's the mixed motives, lead to bright and dark results. Life is like this, which is why we practice. So you're not a fully enlightened being, and so we can't expect ourselves to be perfect. And if we do, then that's kind of a form of delusion. And so let's just forget about judging ourselves and just work with the arising moment. The right intention is a continual aspiration. And seeing our mixed motives is one step toward liberation from ignorance and from being blinded by either desire or aversion. And so welcome such a realization, even though it's painful. The less judgment you have toward yourself about your own mixed motives, the more clearly you can see how they cause suffering. This insight is what releases the dark motives and allows room for bright ones, the motive of right intention. So in my previous example, the mixed motive of causing harm to the other by blaming was present, and in letting that go, there was more room in the mind for the brighter motives. For some people, the most difficult aspect of right intention has to do with the role that it plays in the formation of karma. The Buddha classified karma as one of the imponderables, meaning we can never fully understand it. Attempting to do so is not fruitful. Yet we are challenged to work with the truth that every action has both a cause and a consequence. The primary factor that determines karma is intention. Therefore, practicing right intention is crucial to gain peace and happiness. In Buddhist teachings, karma refers to the seed from action. This means that any word or action is either wholesome or unwholesome, and it plants a seed of future occurrence that will blossom on its own accord when the conditions are correct, just like a plant grows when there's the right balance of sunshine and water and nutrients. So whether an action is wholesome or unwholesome is determined by the intention that originated it. On reflection, this is common. It's just really common sense. The example that is often given in the suttas is about a knife. When a knife is in the hands of a surgeon versus those of an assailant, that each might use a knife to cut you, but one has the intention to help you heal, while the other has the intention to harm you. Yet you could die from actions of either. Intention is the decisive factor that differentiates the two. In this view, we are well served by cultivating right intention. I like to refer to it as the heart's intention. What we have to rely on is our intuitive knowing, our felt wisdom. In the Buddha's time, this was referred to as bodhicitta, the awakened mind heart. It's said that a karmic seed may bloom at one of 3 times: immediately, later in this lifetime, or in a future life. And conversely, what is happening to you at each moment is the result of seeds planted in a past life, an earlier life, or in the previous moment. Whatever our feelings are about the past, the latter 2 are cause and effect phenomenon that you can recognize as true. But here's a thought to reflect on that isn't often mentioned. Whatever is manifesting itself in your life right now is affected by how you receive it. And how you receive it is largely determined by your intention in this moment. Imagine that you might have a difficult interaction later today. If you're not mindful of your intention, you might respond to the situation with a harmful physical action, or maybe because you got caught in your fear or panic or greed or ill will. But with awareness of your intention, you would refrain from responding physically by saying or doing anything. Instead, you might say something unskillful, causing less harm. Or if you have a habit of speaking harshly, with right intention, you might only have a negative thought, but find the ability to refrain from uttering the words that you might later regret. When you're grounded in your intention, you're never helpless in how you react to any event in your life. While it's true that you can often not control what happens to you, with mindfulness of intention, we can mitigate the effects of what occurs in terms of both the moment itself and what kind of karmic seed we plant for the future. And so we develop resolve. The Buddhist teachings suggest that there are certain characteristics, they're called the paramis, you might have heard of them, or the perfections that we can develop to achieve liberation, and they're useful for householders. One of the qualities, right resolve, has to do with developing the will to live by your intentions. Through practicing right resolve, we learn to set our mind to maintaining our values and our priorities, and to resist the temptation to sacrifice our values for material or ego gain. We gain the ability to consistently hold our intentions, no matter what arises. So right intention is like a muscle. We develop it over time by exercising it. And when you lose it, you just start over again. There's no need to judge yourself or quit when you fail to live by your intentions. You're developing the habit of right intention so that it becomes a conscious way of living, an automatic response to all situations. Right intention is organic. It thrives when cultivated and wilts when neglected. At times, the benefits of acting from our intentions can seem so clear and so obvious that we vow, I'm going to live this way from now on. And then we get lost, and then we get overwhelmed, and we conclude that it's more than we can do. These emotional reactions, while understandable, miss the point. If we make right intention a goal, we are grasping at spiritual materialism. Right intention is simply about coming home to ourselves. It's a practice of aligning with the deepest part of ourself while surrendering to the reality that we often get lost in the wanting mind. There's really only 2 things that we're responsible for in this practice. Throughout each day, we can ask ourselves if we're being true to our deepest intentions. If we're not, we start doing so immediately, as best that we're able to. And the outcome of the inquiry and effort might seem minimal, sort of modest at first. But be assured, each time you start over by reconnecting to your intention, you're taking one more step toward finding your own authenticity and freedom. In that moment, you are remembering yourself and grounding your life in your heart's intention. You're living the noble life of the Buddhist teachings by this, remembering regularly our deepest intentions and being true to our deepest intentions of non-harming, skillful speech, remembering some of the Eightfold Path or the Four Noble Truths. So I would like to conclude this talk by playing, if it will come across, I hope it will, I'd like to play a compassion and wisdom talk that was given by Kamala Masters on the two wings of the Dharma. Is it on, Karen?
I just, it had fallen
Oh,
over,
okay.
so it's ready to go.
All right, so let's see. It might be sound asleep. The speaker might be sound asleep because it hasn't had to say anything recently.
Will this be visual and audio? Or
Just audio. So let me pull it up and see if it's going to open up. Okay, it's opening up. That's good for starters. Now, how will you hear it on Zoom? Maybe I need to do this. Maybe I need to bring it up higher so that you can hear it through my computer mic. And if you can't, I'll figure out something else with the microphone. Okay, let's see how this is. She has a quiet voice, so this may or may not work.
And in our training and in our practice here through the month or so and more, we've been understanding one of the aspects of wisdom, which is learning the causes and conditions for things to arise.
Can you hear that?
In this moment.
Is it too?
We've been understanding them, taking them in, getting used to them, not letting them be a surprise to us, but letting our minds be more and more aware of them, to open to them. So we're not only opening to what's going on, the dukkha in the world, but we're opening to the dukkha in our own hearts. Where are we suffering? When we see what's going on with ourselves, we connect more with others. So I know in my own practice, as I connect with the suffering in the world, it does help me open to what's going on in my own heart. I see the suffering of different groups of people, different cultures, different colors, and it connects me to how I have suffered in the world in that way. It doesn't matter what color or what culture we're from. In some ways, we've all felt not heard or dismissed or put aside or being treated in a way that's lowly and not equally. And nowadays, just in terms of the bigger picture, there's a lot of social and deep injustices that are being known and coming out, that we're being, actually, we have the privilege of knowing now, of bringing a kindness and a knowing to what's been going on for a long, long time in ourselves and in the world. And so I hope that we can bring a sense of compassion to all out there? Can we touch into the suffering in our own hearts? When we see the suffering in our own hearts, can that open us to, oh, now I can understand in my own way how others may feel? It takes a lot of courage to do that. There's a word in Spanish, it's called coraje, it means courage. And that courage is very directly related to opening to suffering. So can we have the courage to open to the suffering? During this time, it's great. We're breaking so many deep barriers. We're learning so much about how there's been so much suffering that hasn't been seen or wanted to be seen for a long, long time, centuries, in our country here, the United States and other places. So it's going to take a lot of courage and honesty to open to all that, a lot of compassion, a lot of strength. And there's one quality of the four Brahma-viharas that's going to empower that compassion to really open up, so that it can open up to this suffering, but also open up to the wisdom of understanding that suffering, understanding the history of it, having a context for it, relating that to human beings and not just the history of our past, but right. It's opening right balance of mind that's able to really open to it without pushing it away, without rushing to something that's more pleasant for us, but simply opening to it. Sometimes we forget that the experience of compassion has a lot to do with spaciousness also, not just balance, which it can often just imply equanimity, like balance equally, but it also means big, spacious heart. We need a big heart to hold what the world is going through now. People are standing up for injustices and wanting them to be known, to be seen, for certain peoples, for their suffering to be seen. So can we open to all that with the spacious balance? That will empower this compassion. And it said that without compassion, we would not be able to open to the first noble truth. And that first noble truth is the very beginning of the path to wisdom. Opening to suffering, opening to right view, opening to seeing how things really are. We're really called to be in our best minds and hearts these days, to really up-level our practice and up-level our, with the permission we give ourselves to open to whatever's going on and find our balance little by little as we open. Maybe we can't just open our petals wide all of a sudden, but we can take it bit by bit and open to how things are in ourselves and in the world. So I want to remind you about some compassion and equanimity practice I gave you early on in our coming together. When we're open to whatever soft heart to it, but also energy to be with it, to connect with it. When doing that, to have that wisdom to step back if we need to rest someplace in our own hearts or to rest in nature, if it's too much to open to. And to do it little by little, not trying to pull your petals open. Old story I tell a lot of people, many of you have heard that I was partners with somebody for a long, long time and wanting to have that person be in the dharma more and change, and that person just so that we'd be together. But that person said, don't rip my petals open before they're ready. And that really gave me big teaching, and just to be with things as they are. If I could, well, it happened that our karma didn't keep us together, but yeah, we can't rip our own petals open either. Take it bit by bit when we're opening to how things are in the world. Sometimes we need compassion practice, like may my heart open with wisdom and grace to whatever's going on in the world. Using a phrase that helps you open and connect. Compassion is connecting with what's difficult, not backing up or turning away or striking out, which are the near and far enemies, but really connecting with it as we can, little by little. Compassion for ourselves when we need to move back, take a breath, not go there so fast. I know a lot of us need to do that. And sometimes with compassion, we need equanimity. So a lot of times in my own compassion practice, I use equanimity with compassion. Perhaps my phrase is, may I open to this difficulty with equanimity, to remind myself to be just spacious. Let it come, let it arise. Don't get identified with it. Let it pass on. So may I open to this difficulty that's around us, around me right now, with a spacious, open heart, in the right timing, in the right way. This is equanimity. Equanimity has a lot of wisdom with it. In fact, if we really examine all of these, how these beautiful Brahma Viharas come together with wisdom, we see that, for example, loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, all of them need equanimity in order to empower them. What does it empower all of those to do? It empowers all of those to open to more wisdom. So you could say that compassion, wisdom, two wings of the Dharma, connected by equanimity. So that's equanimity. I talked a lot about to the outer conditions. We're facing seismic changes now, with an election coming up here in the US, especially. A lot of the news is hard to listen to.
This was
a
in
lot
2020.
of reactivity can come up. For me, it can, speaking for myself. And I have to practice a lot of equanimity. So this is how it is in the world right now. Offering compassion after that, offering metta after that. I can't do anything about it while I'm driving, but I can make that offering, and I can also change the valence of my heart a little bit. So that's very powerful practice to bring compassion, equanimity into the world. But actually, a more intimate place and a closer place that we don't think about as much, perhaps, is bringing equanimity to ourselves, especially when that reactivity has already arisen, just to remind you of that. When it's already come up in your own mind, in our own minds and hearts, when that gripping or that tightness or that aversion or hatred or rage about what's going on outside, can we put that aside for a minute and deeply connect with our own hearts and see, this is how it is in my heart right now. Bringing that equanimity right there. This is how it is right now. May I accept how it is with balance in my heart. My heart, my mind is relating to the world in a way that's not with wisdom. If I act it out, if I speak it out, if it's, the near and far enemy of equanimity is reactivity is a far enemy in ways of holding on too tightly or pushing away with cruelty. Or it could be the near enemy is just like not caring at all, having a big distance between what's happening out there and what's happening in here. Just apathy. So knowing that terrain as you practice, is there reactivity in our hearts to the world? Is there apathy? This is what's going on in my heart right now. So really being aware, bringing that awareness there. So equanimity usually has a misunderstanding connected to it in the world and socially. It's like, I should be just in myself, equanimity should just be, well, I'm really cool with it all. I mean, that's what one of our teachers calls fake equanimity. It's not really equanimity, sometimes it may be apathy. But equanimity is when we can really open to whatever's going on in here and out there, and it can accept it without another moment of reactivity. So equanimity is not this perfect balance where we're just kind of walking on a cloud and just seeing everything beneath us. That is not equanimity. It's when we can open to whatever's happening with a calm, abiding heart, see it with pristine clarity, and be balanced in our relationship to it. So there could be rage coming up, but we don't have to act on it. It could come up and it could fall back. A tightness to how we want it to be can come up, but it can be seen. There can be equanimity with that's going on, and it can just dissolve into pieces. So equanimity really is a connection between compassion and wisdom, because equanimity helps the mind to see how things really are. Difficult out there, difficult in here, but can still be with it. So remember, please remember when you're out in the world to bring equanimity to both outwardly and to remember your inner, what's going on inwardly in relationship to the world. Sometimes it's actually relationship to a moment of reactivity that we had where we acted out, then we're reacting to our own layered happen when we don't see that reactivity coming up towards ourselves even. So reactivity is one of the, it's a far enemy, one of the distant ways that we think maybe we're being cool by, shouting out and being all hateful. But can we let that calm down a little while before we say anything, before we do anything? Equanimity gives us the skill set to do that, to see what's harmful and refrain, to see what's going to be harmonious, and to do what we need to do. So it doesn't mean non-action. It just means taking action or saying words based on a clear seeing, a spacious and being with wisdom. What's really going on? With an acceptance. So hopefully you'll bring that equanimity in the world. See it for yourselves within you. Bring it to your own heart and mind. if you can bring it here, you need to, you could probably practice a lot here, bring that into the world. We often forget that piece. We're just busy doing that conditioned thing, that in conditional relations, that hears, thinks something in a certain way, it just goes woof, and it hurts, causes harm. So, compassion and wisdom, the two great wings of the Dharma. How are we balancing both? We balance them with equanimity. We can see more clearly. We can go more deeply in our practice in all ways. So, as usual, this teaching is for all beings. The Buddha taught that the Dharma is for all beings. It doesn't matter what color, what culture, what our conditioned relations are. We can apply whatever the Buddha's teachings are to all of us and find the appropriateness wherever it lands for you.
That was a little sketchy because she teaches from Hawaii and her internet sometimes gets disconnected. And it was given in July of 2020. So it was a lot of what she was referring to in the beginning was right after the killings of that happened in Minnesota. And so she was painfully aware of, as we all were, those challenges at the time. And we continue to have plenty of challenges that come to us from the outside. And we have attachments to how we think things should be. But being able to really see the intention and have skillful thinking, skillful thought around generosity, letting go, loving friendliness, compassion, equanimity. We have the teachings to call upon. And if we forget all of this, just coming back to the sitting cushion, just coming back to the breath, coming back to the present moment, and holding ourselves in kindness for watching whatever arises is never going astray and still keeps you in your intention of non-harming and non-greed and clearer communication, less confusion. So I think that'll be the official end of this talk.